Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Nikhil and I am an Azure Data Engineer with over 3.2 years of experience currently working at TCS. Today, I am super excited to share my recent interview experience with Deloitte. I will walk you through the questions I was asked across various topics like Azure Data Factory, ADLS Gen 2, SQL, Databricks, and some coding challenges. This video is for anyone preparing for data engineering interviews or who is looking for insights into what top tier companies like Deloitte focus on during the interviews. So let's dive in. I introduced myself and they asked me project related questions. So the first question which they asked was about tell me about your project and explain it end to end. So here I explained around what are the sources, like what is the endpoint and where the data comes from, whether it is an API or does it come from some storage layer, and also what and all tools were used. For example, in our project we used Azure Data Factory for ingestion and also as well as for orchestration. And apart from that, we used Azure Data Bricks for processing, and also we have used ADLS Gen 2 for storing it. And the second question which they asked was on what measure you have mentioned about the storage cost decreased and the cost optimization has been done. So in my project, I have done a cost optimization. So where we were using some different file format. Now let's move on to the questions which were asked from ADF and ADLS Gen 2. So the first question which was asked was, consider that there are around 10 million CSV files in ADLS Gen 2. So how we would be able to read it and process them using Azure Data Factory. So I had to explain that in detail. For example, like how I can use the copy activity and can I would be able to read them parallelly. Like what kind of integration runtime I can use. So the follow-up question was around like what is integration runtime. So here I had to explain about the integration runtime, different integration runtimes which is available in Azure Data Factory. And the next question was about like what is variable and parameter in ADF. Then the next question was about like I had to explain different activities and brief out what each activity does. For example, in ADF we have like lookup activity, get metadata activity, notebook activity, etc. Right? So I had to explain them briefly. And then there was a another question which was related to a pipeline failure. So he asked me about like the pipeline is scheduled and it got failed, so I need to automate it by sending the mail when it gets failed. So how would you implement it? For example, like I should be using something like a failed activity and I need to implement it. So I had to describe like how I can do it. And then the next question was about like how do you handle the exceptions in ADF? For example, if there are exceptions in ADF, right? So I had to we need to handle it. So for example, like by creating a ticket on top of that, right? So these kind of things how I would be able to handle. So this was asked. Then the next question was about like if the pipeline is running very slow, how would I approach it and how would I fix it? So it was something like how would I optimize the ADF pipeline. Then the next question was about like what is the difference between blob storage and ADLS Gen 2, why ADLS Gen 2 is required. So here I had to speak more about the hierarchical namespace which is available in ADLS Gen 2 but it's not available in blob storage. Next up with the SQL questions, I was asked about what are indexes and why we need it. So here I had to speak about what are the indexes and how they improve the performance when we are querying. And also I had to explain the difference between clustered index as well as the non-clustered index. Then the next question was about like what is stored procedure, and he asked me to implement it with a basic example by taking an employee table. So here I had to speak about like the store procedure is something like a function which we use in Python. And the next question was about what is a view, why we need it, and we will also query from the table itself, right? Then how it can improve the performance. So here I had to speak about the view, different types of views like materialized views and etc. And the next question was about what is common table expression and subquery and what are the difference between them, and will common table expression really improves the query performance. Then in my project I have mentioned that I have worked on Cloud Spanner which was running on Google Cloud. So here he asked me about like how you have optimized the SQL queries in Google Cloud Spanner. And then he has asked me about like how was the migration from Oracle to Cloud Spanner was done. Can you explain it end to end? Now moving on to Azure Databricks, I was asked about how do you connect ADLS Gen 2 with Databricks, in where we will mention the role assignment. So we have basically like we can connect Azure Databricks with ADLS Gen 2 with respect to like more than two or three methods. One is with respect to SaaS token, and then we have a service principal. We can also use a managed identity. Apart from that, one more is there. And then the follow-up question was like if you are using service principal to connect with ADLS Gen 2 from Azure Databricks, explain the steps and how would you code it. So here we need to mention the Spark configuration and all right within the Azure Databricks. I had to explain the same. And why I should use service principal and how would I create it. So for creating the service principal, we need to go to Azure portal and we need to have the app registrations and all right. So I had to explain the steps. And then moving on, I was asked like what is Databricks runtime and why we need it. Then I was asked about what are workflows. So here I had to explain about the jobs, tasks and all which we need to create in Azure Databricks. Then the next question was about the Medallion architecture. So I had to explain more about the Medallion architecture where we'll be having a bronze, silver and gold. And then he asked me to explain Delta file format briefly. It was based on something like I had to explain more about the Delta logs which will get created and the checkpoints files and all which will get created. And also I had to explain how the schema enforcement is been done in Delta file format, as well as like how does it support ACID properties and all. Then the next question was kind of a scenario based question. So he asked me something like consider that you are working in Facebook and user is writing data for each record. Since each record is been written, right, a new JSON transaction log will get created for each write when we are using Delta file format. So here we can use data lake itself only, right? Why do we require Delta file format? Because it can decrease performance every now and then, right? So here I had to explain how it will be handled within a Delta file format, like how the JSON files will get created and also how we can optimize it. Like for example, how the checkpoints will get created, and I had to explain him about the optimize command and all. Then there was one question related to the jobs. So consider a job is running very slow in Azure Databricks. How would you approach the issue and how would I make it faster? Then he asked me what are the optimization techniques that I have worked on and explain them in brief. For example, I need to explain more about the different joins as well as the AQE and many other things. For example, like how would I use cache and where I should be using persist, and also with respect to should I be using a broadcast hash join or I should be using a sort merge join or I should be using a shuffle hash join. So these kind of things. And then the next question was about with respect to memory management, how would I optimize the job? For example, here I had to speak about the executor memory, driver memory, as well as within executor memory what is this reserve memory, the user memory, and within the Spark memory we have the execution memory as well as the storage memory, right? I had to explain more about this. Now moving on to coding part, I was asked about to write a different DB utils which I know. For example, in DB utils we have dbutil.fs.ls, then we have copy command, move command, different things, right? I had to write it down. And then the second question was about like how would I read a data frame from the CSV files, and I had to explain the different options and the different modes when reading it. For example, we have a append mode, error effects, it's different modes, right? So I had to explain them. And then the next question was about I had to write a schema structure for employee table using structs for the columns where we are having id name, and within name we have a struct columns like the like it's kind of like columns within a columns, where the name is having first name as well as the last name, and then we have a salary. And moving on to next question, I was asked to find the third highest salary for an employee using the data frame approach as well as the Spark Spark.sql approach using the PySpark. And the next question was about I had to implement a code for SED2 with housekeeping columns using Azure Databricks. So housekeeping columns in the sense I had to use the start time and then the end time, as well as like I had to have something like a is active. It's kind of a flag where I would set it, like whether it is a true or false. So this kind of thing. And then I was asked to write a code for two-sum. It's a easy lead code problem where I had to explain the different approaches. So I explained him with respect to brute force. Then I went to binary search and then I explained him about the hash map. So he asked me to write a code using the hash map approach. And moving on to DevOps, right? I was not asked much on the DevOps, but I was asked like whether I have worked on the DevOps and whether I have created a pipeline using Azure DevOps. And also have explained him like the notebooks and all are getting converted into artifacts and then they are been um, like running as a pipeline on the Azure DevOps. So then he asked me a question like how the artifacts gets created behind the scene. So this brings us to the end of today's video. I hope these questions and answers give you a solid foundation for your interviews. Always focus on explaining your thought process clearly during the interviews. It's not just about the right answer, it's about how we demonstrate the approach. If you find this helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, drop your questions in comments, and I will be happy to cover them in future videos. Thank you for watching and have a good luck with your interviews. Thanks a lot.